Now, creating animations with manual keyframes is fine, but eventually you're going to get to the point where it just gets too awkward or too complicated to keep it going. You know what it's like. You're way behind schedule on a project, you have this animation that just won't work, and your timeline is a mess of keyframes, and none of the little buggers are working. Now, luckily you can avoid a lot of this carnage using expressions, which is After Effects' using a secret weapon in After Effects known as expressions, which lets you create really nice animations very quickly and with a minimum of keyframes. And to prove it, I'm going to show you 5 of my favorite expressions which will have you making nice animations quickly and with very little stress in next to no time. Now, expressions are little commands that let you automate things in After Effects. Basically what they do is they let you create animations that would normally take a long time or would just be too fiddly to do with manual keyframes. Now, the first time you see expressions, they can seem pretty scary, but trust me, even though they look like computer code, they're really not as complicated as they seem. There are tons of expressions out there and millions of ways of using them. Now, you could try to remember them all yourself, but you'll probably just hurt yourself in the process. Me, I'm quite forgetful, so I keep a trusty little notebook where I make a note of all the good expressions that I come across so I don't have to remember them. In fact, after the last video where we did an animation where the wheels on a bike were turning around, I found an even easier way of making that rotation happen, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Now, this first expression is the most basic of all the expressions, and it's probably the most useful one you can use in an After Effects project. Now, let's say we want the circle on this layer to always be the same color as the star on this layer. All we need to do is grab the Pickwhip for the fill color we want to control and drag it to the fill color on our parent or boss layer. This is the color that's going to do all of the controlling. Now, when we change the color of our star, the circle changes color as well. We can also use our star layer to control the size and the opacity of the circle. So we do this by linking each of the properties on the circle layer to the star using the Pickwhip. Now, after linking the scale property, when I change one shape, the other one changes. Now, the same goes for opacity. If I change the opacity of the star, the circle changes as well. Now, if you need to create random movement in an animation that looks kind of natural, this is the expression you need to use. Just alt-click on the position stopwatch, type in wiggle, and then specify how often you want the property to change and by how much. Now, in this example, our position will change by up to 30 pixels once every second. What's cool is you can apply a wiggle expression to pretty much any numeric value in After Effects. Now, let's say you want to create an animation that continues indefinitely. You know, something like an animated background or the wheels on the bike from the last video. You could create one iteration of the animation and then copy and paste the keyframes all along your timeline and hope that you paste them in the right place, because if you don't, then the animation goes haywire, and usually the best way to fix that is just to delete everything and start again. Instead, you can take this one iteration of your animation and then add a loop expression so that it continues indefinitely or for a specific length of time. Really quite cool. Strictly speaking, there are 4 types of loop expression. There's cycle, offset, continue, and ping pong. Now, the one most people use and the one that's genuinely most useful is the cycle loop expression. Okay, so we have a circle here that moves from the left of the screen to the right of the screen, and what we'd like to do is loop it so that it looks like lots of balls are rolling across the screen. So what we're going to do is alt-click on the stopwatch to open the expression UI. Next, we're going to type the loop out property and specify the loop type cycle. Now, what's happening here is that the animation finishes and then After Effects jumps back to the very start once it reaches that last keyframe, and it repeats the whole process again. Now, to make things interesting, you can change cycle to ping pong, and what happens then is After Effects shuttles backwards and forwards between the first and last keyframe over and over again, so you get this pendulum effect. There's also a really useful variation on loop out, and that's the loop in property. Now, what this means is instead of starting the loop after the last keyframe in your animation, this one starts looping immediately and continues until you hit the last keyframe, and then it stops. Now, this is handy if you want something to move continuously and then stop at a specific point in your comp. The time expression is really useful if you need to control something with a number that increases steadily. Basically what this does is it converts your current position on the timeline into a number of seconds, which you can then use as the value for some other property. Now the beauty of this is that it's linked to the duration of your comp, so if you need to make your comp longer or shorter, this number will keep counting with it and you won't need to change anything. Now in this case, we're going to use the time value to control how much rotation is applied to an object. All we're going to do is type time in the expression area and then see what happens, which in this case isn't very much. The reason it doesn't seem like much is happening here is because the time expression rotates our object here by 1 degree per second, which is really slow. So to get the square to rotate more quickly, we just multiply time by some big number until we get the speed that we want. Now this next one is a bit tricky and it can be a little hard to get your head around it, but it is seriously impressive, especially if you're trying to create animations where something is rolling in a specific way. What we're going to do here is use the movement of an object to control how much it rotates and in which direction. Now take a look at this circle. I can keyframe it to move backwards and forwards across the screen. So far so boring. But to make it look like this is rolling at the right speed and in the right direction, I could spend a few minutes keyframing this and hope that I don't need to change it, or I could just link the rotation to the layer's position. Now this is rotating a little bit too quickly for my liking, so let's slow it down by multiplying it by some small number, 0.4. Now how this works is if you multiply it by a number that's smaller than 1, it slows it down, but if you divide it by a number that's smaller than 1, it speeds up. Now, do you remember I said there was something a bit tricky about this expression? Well, there is, and here it comes, so brace yourself. If you're wondering what this 0 is, it refers to the x part of our position parameter. Now, by default, Pickwhipping links to the x-axis, which is the first part of our position property. Now, if you think about it, this actually makes sense, because position consists of an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate, so that's where this is coming from. Let's say we want to have our rotation controlled by movement on the y-axis. We'd put 1 inside those brackets instead of the 0 because it's the second part of the property. Yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, but computers start counting from 0. So 0 is the first. Anyway, that's us done now. With just this handful of expressions, you can create some pretty special animations quickly and easily with a minimum of stress. And the good thing is there are tons more expressions out there to try. The trick is just see what works, try them in all sorts of different scenarios, different projects and different types of animations, and make a note of the ones that work. So get in touch if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like me to cover in a future video. So until then, take it easy.